Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. It started with begging. Quiet, humiliating, endless begging. Every night felt the same. Me reaching for her hand, her pulling it away like my touch was something to avoid. I told myself she was tired, stressed, distracted. I told myself anything that would make it hurt less. But after months of hearing, "Not tonight," or "I'm just not in the mood," the lie started to rot. Her name's Megan. We've been married 8 years. I used to think we were solid. We had the same routines, the same favorite takeout, even the same bad Netflix taste. But somewhere along the way, she stopped looking at me like a man and started looking at me like a roommate. The moment everything changed came on a Sunday morning. She was scrolling on her iPhone, sipping Starbucks while sitting at the kitchen counter. I asked if we could talk. She didn't even look up. "About what?" she said. I told her how I missed us, how I felt invisible. She sighed, rolled her eyes, and said, "You're obsessed with sex. You need to grow up. Not everything is about that." The words hit like a punch. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. I just nodded, went upstairs, and sat in silence. That's when it hit me. Intimacy wasn't the issue. Respect was. She had stopped seeing me as someone worth desiring, and I had kept pretending it didn't matter. That night, I lay awake beside her, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. It sounded peaceful, effortless. I stared at the ceiling, realizing I was the only one losing sleep in this marriage. The next day, I stopped trying. No more reaching out. No more questions. No more begging. I went to work early, stayed late, started lifting again at the gym near Walmart. I focused on myself, not to prove anything to her, but because I needed to remember who I was before her indifference became normal. 2 weeks later, she noticed. She asked if I was okay, said I'd been distant. I told her I was fine. She looked confused, almost threatened by the calm. Then came the moment I'll never forget. She asked me for money, a few hundred for some work trip. The same woman who couldn't stand my touch now wanted my help. I looked at her and said, "You never had a problem asking for what you needed. I guess that hasn't changed." Her smile faltered. That was the first time she realized I wasn't begging anymore. I was done. And when a man stops begging, that silence becomes dangerous. After that conversation, something inside me went quiet. I didn't make a scene or confront her. I just shut down the part of me that kept chasing her validation. It's strange how fast things shift once you stop asking for attention. The house didn't feel tense anymore. It just felt empty. I started spending more time outside the house. Early mornings at the gym, long evenings in my truck, parked near the lake, just thinking. I didn't text her where I was or when I'd be home. For years, I told myself that being a good husband meant being transparent. Now I realize transparency only works when both sides care. She'd stopped caring long ago. One Friday night, she came home late from what she called a team dinner. She smelled like expensive perfume that wasn't hers. She didn't even pretend to explain. Just tossed her coat over a chair, poured herself a glass of wine, and asked if I'd paid the credit card bill. I said yes, kept my tone flat. No questions, no curiosity. That rattled her more than anger ever could. Over the next few weeks, I started observing instead of participating. Her patterns, her phone habits, the sudden bursts of laughter at her notifications, the way she'd leave the room to answer calls. I wasn't jealous anymore. I was studying her like a stranger, because that's what she'd become. At work, I poured myself into something new, a project idea that had been sitting in the back of my mind for years. A small platform for local freelancers, something that could grow. The long hours felt cleansing. I'd come home exhausted but grounded, my focus somewhere she couldn't touch. Then one morning, she tried to start a casual conversation over breakfast. I could tell she was testing me, checking if she still had a hold on me. She mentioned her trip again, said she'd need some extra money. I didn't even look up from my laptop. I said, "You can use your card." She frowned, waiting for the old version of me, the one who would ask where she was going, who she'd be with, what she needed. But I stayed silent. That silence cut deeper than any argument could. I could see it in her eyes, the realization that I was no longer orbiting her world. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I was free. I don't know when exactly I stopped caring about her explanations, but by the time her business trip came around, I didn't even ask where she was going. She packed her suitcase in silence while I sat on the couch, scrolling through emails on my MacBook. She tried to act casual, mentioning the meetings, the networking, the hotel. I nodded, pretending to listen. I think that was the first time she realized my silence wasn't passive anymore. It was deliberate. The morning she left, she gave me a half-hearted kiss on the cheek, the kind you give a relative, not a husband. I watched her leave, her luggage clattering down the porch steps. The sound echoed longer than it should have. When the door closed, the house finally exhaled. For the first time in months, I felt peace. That weekend, I didn't wait by the phone. I didn't scroll through her social media or check her location. I went to Home Depot, bought paint, and started fixing up the guest room I'd been ignoring. Something about restoring the space made me feel alive again. It wasn't about creating distance. It was about reclaiming something that had always been mine. My time, my focus, my sanity. On the second night of her trip, I got a text. "Don't worry. I'm fine." No photo, no context, just that. I looked at the message for a moment, then typed 2 words, "I'm not." Then I hit send and turned my phone face down. 30 minutes later, 15 missed calls. I didn't answer a single one. I let the phone buzz itself into silence. It was strange how quickly indifference could turn into power. She wasn't used to being ignored, especially by me. When she came home 2 days later, she acted like nothing happened. She tried to laugh, to ask about the house, to keep the air light. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. She knew something had changed. That night, while she was in the shower, I saw her phone light up on the counter. A man's name I didn't recognize. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I'd already learned that truth always reveals itself to the patient. And I was done being impatient. So I sat down, opened my laptop, and began sketching the foundation for something bigger, something of my own. A project that would outlive this version of my life. I wasn't escaping her. I was outgrowing her. After that weekend, I started vanishing from her life in quiet, calculated steps. Not disappearing completely, just removing myself from the places where she used to find me. No more waiting by the door when she came home. No more dinners at Applebee's that she never appreciated anyway. No more small talk to fill the silence she created. I stopped giving her my presence as a reward for her indifference. She noticed, of course. They always do, just not right away. At first, she tried to brush it off, acting like my distance was just a mood. But soon, the house started to feel too big for her. I'd leave early in the morning and not come home until late. She'd text, asking when I'd be back. I'd reply hours later, sometimes not at all. One night she asked if I was seeing someone else. The irony nearly made me laugh. I just said I was busy. That word seemed to sting more than denial ever could. It reminded her that my world no longer revolved around her. In truth, I was seeing someone myself. I'd been buried under her emotional neglect for so long that rediscovering who I was felt like meeting a stranger. I worked late, but not at my job. I worked on my platform idea, refining every line of code, building the kind of life that wouldn't depend on someone else's approval. Meanwhile, her patterns were unraveling. Late-night calls and hushed tones, sudden changes of mood, the restless guilt of someone who no longer controlled the narrative. I didn't confront her. I didn't need to. I'd already accepted that whatever she was doing, whoever she was doing it with, was her problem, not mine. The night I realized I had her completely off balance was simple. She was standing in the kitchen, trying to pick a fight about nothing, about how I didn't talk anymore, how I didn't try. I let her vent, her words bouncing off me like rain on glass. When she finished, I just said, "You used to love the silence. Now you can't stand it." Then I walked past her and went to bed. That night, she didn't sleep in our room. I could hear her pacing downstairs, restless, cornered by the very silence she once demanded. The next morning, she looked at me differently. Not angry, not superior, just scared. That's when I knew the balance had shifted completely. She had taken my confidence once. Now I was taking back everything she'd mistaken for weakness. I knew about the other man long before she realized I did. I didn't have to go through her phone or check her messages. When you've lived with someone long enough, silence tells you everything. The sudden guilt in her tone when she said she was working late. The careful way she avoided eye contact when she got home. The way she started dressing up again for client meetings. I didn't need proof. I just needed to watch. He wasn't smarter than me, just louder. Flashy. The kind of guy who needed attention to feel alive. She thought that was excitement. What she didn't realize was that men like that always expose themselves. All I had to do was stay still and let gravity do the work. A week later, I started noticing small things. His name in conversations, his company logo in her emails when she left her laptop open. I didn't confront her. I didn't rage. I took notes. And when the time was right, I moved quietly. I knew he worked in marketing. A quick search told me more than he'd ever want a husband to know. I found inconsistencies, fake clients, duplicate invoices, money that didn't add up. I packaged it neatly, attached it to an anonymous email, and sent it to the company's HR department. Then I closed my laptop and made dinner. 2 weeks later, he was gone. Resigned, they said, though I knew better. Her mood shifted instantly, short, distracted, paranoid. She thought she was hiding the panic, but I could feel it in every move she made. She tried to act sweet again, cooking, asking if I wanted to watch something on Netflix together. I said no. That night, she poured herself a glass of wine, sat across from me, and said, "You've changed." I told her, "So have you." She waited for me to say more, but I didn't. She wasn't ready to hear the truth yet, that the man she dismissed had already outgrown her. By the end of the week, the walls were closing in around her. The affair had crumbled. Her job was tense. Her phone barely lit up anymore. She didn't know it, but I had become the one thing she couldn't control, calm. And calm terrifies people who build their power on chaos. When she looked at me now, she didn't see the man who used to beg. She saw the man who could walk away at any moment and never look back. That realization, it broke her more than betrayal ever could. The downfall came faster than I expected. One night, she came home from work later than usual. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she poured herself a drink. I didn't ask what was wrong. I already knew. Word had spread. Her secret wasn't just whispered anymore. It was out in the open. Her name was being passed around the office like a bad rumor no one wanted to touch. She tried to keep her composure, to sit across from me at the kitchen table like everything was fine. But her eyes gave her away. Fear has a look. It hides behind forced smiles and nervous gestures. I watched her for a moment, then turned back to my laptop. My silence made her unravel faster than words ever could. Later that week, her coworkers started pulling away. She stopped getting invited to meetings. Her best friend, the one she used to gossip with over Starbucks runs, stopped replying to her messages. The same people who used to praise her confidence now looked through her. She didn't understand it yet, but the structure she'd built her life on, status, validation, control, was crumbling piece by piece. We were invited to a dinner one Friday, hosted by her colleague and his wife. She insisted we go, probably hoping to prove to herself that she still had social ground. I agreed. I wanted to see the moment it happened. It didn't take long. Halfway through the evening, one of the women at the table leaned back, looked straight at Megan, and said with a smile that cut deeper than a knife, "You really thought no one would notice?" The laughter that followed wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was pity dressed as politeness. Megan froze. Her fork slipped from her hand and clattered against the plate. The entire table went quiet. She forced a laugh, said something about people talking too much. But the damage was done. Her image, the one she'd spent years curating, had shattered in public view. I didn't defend her. I didn't reach across the table to comfort her. I just sat there, steady, calm, letting the silence eat at her. When we got home, she demanded to know why I didn't say something. I looked at her and said, "Because this time, it wasn't my mess to clean up." She didn't respond. She just stood there, broken and small, realizing that the man she once ignored had become the one person strong enough to watch her fall and stay silent. After that dinner, she stopped pretending. The facade was gone, stripped away by humiliation. Her phone barely lit up anymore. The constant notifications, the laughter, the endless stream of attention, silenced. She started spending her evenings sitting on the couch, staring at the dark TV screen like it might give her answers. The woman who once told me I was too quiet had now fallen into the same silence she used to despise. I didn't gloat. I didn't remind her of the things she'd said. I just existed beside her like a shadow, present, but unreachable. Every move I made reminded her how far away I'd gone. I'd wake early, make coffee, leave before sunrise, come home late. I'd answer when spoken to, but only enough to be polite. She tried small talk, jokes, soft touches. None of it landed. The space between us was wide and cold. One night, she broke. I found her in the kitchen, crying quietly against the counter. She said she didn't know who she was anymore, that everything was falling apart. I didn't offer comfort. I'd done that for years. Instead, I told her the truth. You built your life around people who clapped for you, not those who cared for you. She looked up, her eyes red, and whispered, "And you stopped clapping." I didn't deny it. At work, my project had gone from concept to reality. We'd launched the first phase, and investors were taking notice. For the first time in my life, people were calling me a leader. I'd stopped begging for love, and the world started paying attention to what I could build instead. It was ironic. Her rejection had turned into the very fuel for my rise. Meanwhile, she was shrinking. Her friends stopped visiting. Even her family called less, tired of her defensive tone and half-truths. She filled her time scrolling Amazon, buying things she didn't need, hoping that packages from Target might distract her from the emptiness inside the house. But no delivery could fix what she'd destroyed. When I got home one evening, she asked if I wanted to have dinner together. I said I'd already eaten. Her eyes glistened for a second before she nodded. She wasn't angry anymore, just tired. That was the moment I realized the power of quiet distance. You don't have to shout to make someone see the truth. You just have to stop showing up where you're not valued and let them feel your absence. The confrontation came quietly, like everything else between us. There was no shouting, no breaking point, just a slow inevitability building in the air. One evening, I came home later than usual. She was waiting at the kitchen table, a single lamp casting long shadows across her face. She didn't look angry, just hollow. Her phone was on the table beside her, untouched. That alone told me how far she'd fallen. She said she wanted to talk. Her voice was soft, almost unfamiliar. I sat down across from her, calm, distant. She started with the usual, apologies that sounded rehearsed, excuses wrapped in regret. Then, for the first time, she said the words I'd never thought I'd hear from her. "I took you for granted. I thought you'd never stop trying." I didn't respond right away. I just looked at her, and the silence between us did all the talking. She waited, desperate for something. Anger, forgiveness, anything that showed she still had a place in my world. But all I gave her was calm detachment. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. "You taught me something," I said. "Begging doesn't build connection. It kills it." She looked down, tears hitting the table, and whispered, "I know." She reached across, her hand trembling slightly, but I didn't move. For years, I'd been the one reaching, the one trying to bridge the gap. Now the roles had reversed, and she was learning how sharp rejection feels when it's returned in silence. The air felt heavier by the second. She said she wanted to start over, that we could fix things. But even as she said it, I could see it in her eyes. She didn't believe her own words. She was clinging to a version of me that no longer existed. I stood up, collected my keys, and told her I needed some air. She asked where I was going. I said, "Somewhere peaceful." Then I walked out. I drove for hours that night, stopping at a Waffle House just before midnight. Sitting there with a cup of coffee and my phone face down, I realized something simple but powerful. I wasn't running away from her anymore. I was walking toward myself. By the time I got home, she was asleep on the couch, lights still on. I stood there for a moment, watching her, and felt nothing. No hate, no sorrow, just quiet acceptance. That's when I knew the love had died long ago. I was only now ready to bury it. Her collapse didn't happen all at once. It came in pieces, like glass cracking one fracture at a time. The confident woman who once told me I was lucky to have her was now a shadow of herself. She stopped wearing makeup, stopped going out, even stopped pretending to care about work. Her phone, once glued to her hand, sat untouched on the counter most days. The world she built around attention had abandoned her, and all that was left was silence, and me. I didn't comfort her. I didn't lecture her. I just stayed quiet, present but distant. I watched her go through the same cycle I'd once lived in. Confusion, denial, guilt. I recognized it all too well. But the difference was, I'd survived it. She was just beginning. One night, she asked me if we could watch something together. She sounded small, like a child asking for company. I nodded, but I didn't move closer. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the light from the TV flickering across her face. She looked like she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. Eventually, she just said, "You used to look at me like I was everything." I replied softly, "I did," until I realized I was looking at someone who didn't see me. That shut down the conversation. She turned back to the screen, pretending to watch, but her tears gave her away. The next morning, I found her in the kitchen holding a photo of us from years ago. We looked younger, happier, unbroken. She asked if I missed those days. I told her, I miss who I was back then. She flinched like I'd hit her. At work, things were accelerating fast. My platform had gained attention from investors. I got invited to a tech conference in Austin, and for the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. Not because someone noticed me, but because I finally noticed me. My name was being mentioned in places that used to feel out of reach. Meanwhile, Megan's world was shrinking. Her friends stopped checking in completely. Even her family had grown distant. She'd sit on the porch some nights, scrolling old messages, probably wondering how she became the one left behind. When I saw her like that, alone, quiet, stripped of everything superficial, I didn't feel satisfaction, just clarity. She was finally living in the silence she once forced me into. The difference was, I had built something in it. She had been destroyed by it. The final moment wasn't loud. It didn't come with accusations or shouting, just the quiet heaviness of two people standing at the end of something they both knew was over. It was a Saturday morning. The sun was spilling through the kitchen blinds, and the smell of burnt toast lingered in the air. Megan sat at the table, wearing one of my old hoodies. She looked tired, worn out, like someone who had finally stopped pretending to be fine. She asked if I could sit down for a minute. I did. For the first time in months, her tone wasn't defensive or cold. It was fragile. She said she'd been thinking about everything, about how she treated me, how she let things fall apart, how she kept taking until there was nothing left to take. Then she said something that caught me off guard. "I used to think you'd always need me," she whispered. "Now I realize I was the one who needed you." I stayed quiet, not to be cruel, but because there was nothing left to say. The truth had already played out between us, scene by scene. She looked at me with tears forming, waiting for a reaction that didn't come. That silence, the same one she'd once used against me, was now her punishment. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. "You didn't lose me when you stopped being intimate. You lost me when you stopped respecting me." Her hands trembled around her coffee mug. She nodded slowly, understanding that I wasn't angry. I was done. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. "Is there any way back from this?" I looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Maybe," I said. "But only if you understand that the man sitting in front of you isn't the same one who used to beg for your affection. He doesn't chase anymore. He chooses." She cried quietly. Not the dramatic kind of tears meant to draw sympathy, just the kind that happen when reality finally sets in. I stood up, placed my mug in the sink, and grabbed my keys. As I walked to the door, she whispered, "I'll change." I turned, met her eyes, and said, "I already did." Outside, the morning was calm. My Ford F-150 sat in the driveway, sunlight glinting off the hood. I took a deep breath, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. For years, I had begged to be seen. Now, I didn't need her eyes on me to feel alive. The silence she once used to control me had become my greatest weapon and my peace. Been through it. When they crossed a line, and you made sure they felt it.